Good afternoon, Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for September 8th, 2012. I figured we could start off by looking at climatology for today, or on today's discussion, not necessarily today's climatology, although it would be like right here. But the idea is that the hurricane season has this slow ramp up, and then quite an increase in activity, followed by a pretty sharp decrease, with a secondary peak in October, and a third peak here in early November. We're sitting at about right here in this region of the graph, approaching September the 10th, and it's been fairly accurate, this pattern here, and I think we will see a tailing off of activity, but then another increase here towards the end of the month as we approach October. I think that's in store for this year as well, and I'll show you why. Looking at the MJO pattern, or the 200 millibar pattern, right now, very negative. All of this orange and red, or whatever that is, just a negative convergence type pattern. You're not having the air spreading out in the upper atmosphere. It's sinking, converging. It's just not favorable for upward motion, or another way to look at it, not favorable for the development of tropical convection and therefore tropical cyclones. The only real favorable areas are out here in the Pacific, and then in and around the Indian Ocean and India itself. Going forward, once we get out to about the 15th of the month, and then beyond that time period towards the last third of the month, a possible change in the pattern where the MJO and the 200 millibar pattern is a little bit more favorable, but nothing very substantial. So we don't see these overwhelming strong signals of favorability anytime soon, and in fact, this is a very overwhelming signal of a very negative pattern. And if we look out at the basin today, yes, we do have two tropical cyclones sitting out here with Leslie and Michael, but Michael was small, was able to really get its act together and take advantage of okay conditions where it was, and it became a Category 3 hurricane. Leslie, on the other hand, has always struggled, just like Isaac did. Of course, Isaac tried to get its act together right before landfall. Luckily, it didn't do so the day before, and have an extra 24 hours. But the pattern all across the Atlantic this year has been one of lots of dry air, fairly negative conditions overall, and we've only managed to squeak out one major hurricane, which is great news, obviously. Now, Leslie here, in fact, let's just zoom into a floater image. Very large dry slot sitting in here. The convection is really limited over on the west side right now. It has moved over practically the same water very slowly for the last several days, so it's churned up all the ocean underneath itself, mixing out a lot of that heat energy in the ocean, not allowing it to intensify. Here's Bermuda, and while it's cloudy there will be a few passing showers and occasional heavy rains. With Leslie being so large and sort of diffuse, I don't foresee there being many problems at all on the islands in and around Bermuda. So anybody with interest out there, don't worry, Leslie will not be nearly the problem that it looked like it could be earlier in the week. Moving north now, will slowly start to move off to the north-northeast, and it may become a hurricane again and possibly bring tropical storm conditions to the islands. Bermuda's not just one island, by the way. It's a whole bunch of them. More than 100, if you didn't know that. The main island is what most people refer to as Bermuda. But anyway, the whole area, not a big deal with Leslie passing by well to the east. Now, one of the issues, if you want to call it that, which has been very favorable for us land dwellers, with the exception of Isaac, is that the pressure pattern and the steering levels out here for the last several years has been basically negative. A negative NAO pattern, North Atlantic Oscillation. And that's just a fancy way of saying that we have not had a strong Bermuda Azores high sitting out here at the peak of the hurricane season to drive systems all the way across and have them hit the United States or Central America. That has not been the case overall, with the only exceptions being Irene and Isaac. And if you want to count Ernesto going into Central America, okay. But you think about all the rest of them that have turned harmlessly out to sea, for the most part, it has been pretty favorable as far as coastal interests go. Now this is what the GFS shows for tonight, and you can see here is Leslie, and a little bit of ridging trying to build in, but it's not going to be enough to force Leslie back and have it hit the U.S. That's just not going to happen. The pattern is such that there's just not much ridge out here, so instead Leslie will creep up, this ridge will retreat a little bit, and Leslie will scoot on by, and Michael, of course, floating up and away too, as the pattern is just not one to steer hurricanes to the west. And if we go out a week, the same thing. Nothing but low pressure out here. Trough there, trough over the United States. The negative NAO holds, and anything that develops here off of Africa, here's another system, the one that's sitting off of Africa today, it turns east of 60 degrees in longitude right there. So for now, I think the next week, maybe 10 days, probably not going to have any threats to land areas. However, once we get past the 15th of September, and especially the 20th, I believe that the western Atlantic here will become more favorable because of the favorable MJO, although it's not that strong a signal, but it may be just enough to get something to try to develop in here, and then we have to really watch and see what happens because we start getting those troughs coming in, and those can pull systems to the north, maybe up the east coast. If there's high pressure out here, they can be steered into Central America. Bottom line is when we get towards the last third of September, that is when we may have another opportunity for impacts along the United States and elsewhere from tropical cyclones. But for now, no such problems at all, not even on Bermuda, where Leslie passing by to the east, again, will just bring some passing showers and increase in the breezes and heavy surf. That's about it. So there you go. Looks like a pretty good weekend ahead. I am Mark Sudduth. HurricaneTrack.com is my website. Check it out sometime if you haven't already. Always glad to produce these videos for Hurricane and Hurricane HD, and I'll have another one for you tomorrow.